Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you guys. It's been a week. What a week. Weather. Lots of weather. Crazy weather. Okay, I'm not going to just speak in bullet points. But anyway, it's very good to see you guys. I'm glad that we're all here. And I've been looking forward to this ever since we met last week. This is pretty fun to be able to talk about these things. And for credit, that's pretty amazing that we get to do that. I still would really like to get to know all of you guys. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to just start off, if we could go around the room and talk maybe just for a moment. Each person just introduce yourself and tell me what it is that you like about Tolkien, or how you came to Tolkien, something like that, or what you're hoping to get out of the class would be really cool too. So Nolan, can we start with you?
Sure.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm Nolan. I'm a grad student in the classical education program. For how I first came to Tolkien.
Sure,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Yeah, my dad would read me Lewis and Tolkien as bedtime stories. So I guess probably like 6 or 7 years old, something like that. Yeah.
Good. And you've been reading ever since?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not all the time.
Okay. Good for your dad. That's great. Good. And what are you hoping to get out of this?
Just deeper appreciation for it, and just being able to wonder at what he put together.
Good. That's a good answer. Good. Thanks. Emma?
I'm Emma. I'm a senior English and history major. I grew up really adoring The Hobbit, just all of the themes and the storytelling of that. And I've never actually finished the entire Lord of the Rings, so I'm looking forward to actually getting to do that in this class and seeing how those themes get elaborated.
Okay. Good. So you've never finished it?
No.
Wow. Had you read the Silmarillion?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so you are now, but yeah. Good. All right. Hi.
Hi, I'm Gray. I'm a senior English major, and my dad would tell me the story of Lord of the Rings, like as if it was his own story. He would just tell me stories of his favorite books and stuff growing up. But it was never read to me. I read it for the first time 2 summers ago. I thought it was great, and I'm hoping to just. I'm really interested in the topic of myth in the Christian faith, and I found that to be really profound in my own relationship with Christ. So I'm really excited to just explore that, as an English major.
Yeah.
What myth is and Christ as being the true myth, and how Tolkien's working with those things.
Good. Thank you. We'll deal a lot with that. So it's very good. Anna?
I'm Anna. I'm a senior history major, and I just grew up reading Tolkien. My mom used to read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings to us, me and my siblings, and then I watched the movies and I played the Lego video games. So I've just always been around Lord of the Rings. So I really wanted to take a class on it to learn more that I don't already know. I've never read the Silmarillion, so that's been really interesting. So yeah.
That's great. Lego Lord of the Rings.
It's incredible.
It's a
Yeah.
great game.
We have it as well. I've just never played it. So okay. My kids play it. That's good. All right. Yeah.
I'm Zealand.
What is it?
Zealand,
With-
New Zealand.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I first encountered Tolkien by reading The Hobbit in the first Lord of the Rings book back in middle school. And I really enjoyed The Hobbit, but I felt it was a little bit tougher to get through the first Lord of the Rings. And then last summer, I watched all the movies with my brother. We had a little movie marathon, and we had never seen them before. And they were really, really interesting to me, and made me want to encounter the books again in a way I haven't had in
So have you had a chance to actually read The Lord of the Rings?
only the first book.
Okay, so this will be your first time through
Yeah.
for this semester. All right, that's cool. I'm kind of jealous, actually. I would love to read it for the first time again. That was many times ago, but that's great. Thanks, Elin. It's good. Where are you from?
Traverse City.
Traverse. Yeah, beautiful. Good.
My name is Colson. I am a senior, and my first introduction to Tolkien was actually watching The Hobbit as a kid, and then going home, watching all the Lord of the Rings, and going to the theaters, watching The Hobbits. And then I read The Hobbit, and then I tried to read Lord of the Rings. I think I would have said that I'd read it, but I hadn't really read it with an academic lens. And then I read it really for the first time, kind of like my senior year of high school, freshman year of college. And it profoundly, more than any other work of fantasy, I think as Tolkien wished, like confirm my purpose as a Christian in this world.
Nice.
So I love it to death, and I'm so excited to get to take a class.
Good. That's great, Colson. Thanks. Yeah. Where are you from?
Branson, Missouri.
Okay. I'm from Hutchinson, Kansas.
Oh, okay,
we used
cool.
to, my parents honeymooned in Branson.
Yay.
So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
that would have been 1957,
Yeah.
right? A little before your time.
It's a fun place.
Yeah, that's great. Good.
My name's Andrew. I'm a senior majoring in philosophy. I'm from Akron, Ohio. My mom read me The Hobbit probably when I was 4, and I don't really remember the first time. Like, I don't know how old I was when I read The Lord of the Rings for the first time. And so The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and The Silmarillion especially have probably formed like my moral imagination, my worldview more than
Sure.
any other work of literature or anything else really that I've ever really read. And so I took a class on Tolkien in high school, but I haven't read The Lord of the Rings again since I started college. So I'm really excited to look at it again with a sort of a college lens.
That's great. And I want you guys all to know it's because of Andrew that we have this class. So he was the one who originally suggested it to me. You did that like 2 years ago,
I think
right?
it was last fall?
Oh, was it? Okay. I was thinking it was even longer ago
No,
than
not
that.
last fall, last spring was it?
Yeah. So I'm glad. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Josh. I'm a junior from Austin, Texas. I grew up going to like the midnight premieres of the Hobbit movies as they were coming out, and then my brother and I watched all the Lord of the Rings movies. But the only book I've read is The Hobbit, so I'm excited to, for the first time, and finally, after years of telling myself that I would, read the Silmarillion and the actual Lord of the Rings, and I'm excited to have a literary basis from the source material for why I love the movies so much. So.
That's great. Good. I had forgotten you were from Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was there last week.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. It was right before we had our class. I was there for about 5 days. We stayed at the Driscoll downtown.
Mm-hmm.
It was really nice, and the weather was amazing.
Incredible.
Just amazing. Yeah. So that's great. Good.
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm a senior. I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm an English major. And my first exposure to Tolkien was my dad reading us The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. The rule was you had to read the book before you watched the movie in the house. So,
That's a good rule.
But since then, I've watched the movies more than I've read the books, so like, guilty. And one time during COVID, when they canceled school in the spring, we were like, let's watch all 6 movies back to back. So we watched all of them for like, I don't know,
24 hours.
yeah, we just watched all of them straight through, and it was great. I fell asleep in the Hobbit movies, but then I woke up for the Lord of the Rings movies, which are
Wow.
better, objectively.
Okay, so it's Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Good.
I'm Jonah Kirstein. I'm a senior finance major, originally from 45 minutes outside of Chicago. And my first exposure to Tolkien was through the movies. I grew up watching the movies. Like I was probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5, and they'd just be on the TV, just playing, and I'd just be watching them. And then I first read the books when I was 10, which is right about around the time when the Hobbit movies started coming out. And so then we watched those. And then I started the Silmarillion, and I didn't finish it. And I started it again, and I didn't finish it. So I did that probably about like 3 times. And I read the books again, I think a couple years back, and now I'm reading them again to my brothers back home.
Oh, neat.
And so, yeah, the high school I went to, a lot of the teachers there who were super influential on me were huge Tolkien scholars. One of them, I think, got his master's in Tolkien studies at Notre Dame, I think, or something like that. So they were really influential, and so they sort of sprinkled in Tolkien and everything they did. So I'm very close to Tolkien. I don't know him very well, so I'd like to get him known better because he's kind of played a huge role in my life. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to take this class.
And it's Jonah?
Jonah.
Great. Thank you. Good. Where are you from? You said south side of Chicago?
45 minutes outside of Chicago, like Plainfield, Aurora area.
Oh, yeah. I know where that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. You've seen Wayne's World, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, because that's Aurora.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Good. Magdalene.
I'm Magdalene. I'm from Waco, Texas. Sophomore history and classics major. And my parents really love Tolkien. And that's kind of how they met here. Was Tolkien. And yeah, so it was just like we have all the Tolkien illustrations all over my house, everything. And I found out when I was pretty young that if I was reading The Lord of the Rings and one of my parents came up to me and asked me to do a chore, and I said, no, but I'm at literally any part, it would be like, oh. So I read The Lord of the Rings a lot of times in like the living room, in a very obvious place. Yeah. And yeah, just love all of Tolkien. I never actually had it read to me because I got to it quickly, but my siblings, they're in the process of having it read to them by my mom for my second or third time. Yeah, I'm just in this class because I wanted to read. Very self-indulgent.
Good. Good. Best kind.
I'm Helen. I'm a senior biochemistry major, and I hail from the greatest city in the world, Cleveland, Ohio. I was first exposed to Tolkien. The Return of the King was on like cable TV, and which meant there were ads like every, I don't know, 30 seconds. So you can imagine how long that was. It was so long that my dad like cut us off. He's like, there's football on, we gotta go. But I just thought it was so cool, so we eventually watched all of the movies, and I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I read the books. I think this was 3rd or 4th grade, and I've reread them pretty regularly ever since. It's always been one of my favorite just books. And I've been meaning to read the Silmarillion for years, and I would get farther every single time I tried. But I never got past, I think, Beren and Luthien. But now I've read it all, and it's like the greatest. So I'm just really excited to read Tolkien
Good.
in a literary collegiate setting.
And it's Helen?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Glad you're in here. Thank you.
My name is Justin. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, so a little bit more to the south and the west. My first exposure to Tolkien was, I think my dad reading me The Hobbit at like 5, but I don't honestly remember. I've read it a lot since then. I haven't read The Lord of the Rings in too long, probably since I started high school. I'm taking this class. I really enjoy the Christianity of Tolkien and how that shows forth in his books. I've done a lot with Quenya more recently and with the Elvish scripts, but that has a very academic side to it, and a lot of people there are less interested in the Christianity, so I really want to get back into that because it's my favorite part. I really love it.
Yeah, that's good. Tell me your name again.
Justin Cook.
Justin, thank you.
My dad says hi.
Okay. Who's your dad?
Father Anthony Cook. You were on his podcast a little while back.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
You did not make the connection.
I did not really. Yeah, that's great. Well, and you know, your parents went to school. They were the
Yes.
same age as Magdalene's parents.
Okay.
So they were the same grade, same class.
They probably knew
Okay.
each other then.
I didn't know that was your dad.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, he and I did a podcast about a year ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was really good.
Okay. Yeah, that was fun. Good. Thank you. Cecilia.
Hi, I'm Cecilia. I'm a freshman bio major, and I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona. My dad read me The Hobbit when I was 6, Lord of the Rings when I was 8. I think I read the Silmarillion for the first time when I was about 14. I've read it a couple times since then. I'm obsessed with Tolkien. I love all the books. I've watched all the movies. And I'm also obsessed with storytelling. I'm a bit of a writer myself, and I'm really fascinated by our roles as human beings, as storytellers, and that aspect of being made in the image of God. So hopefully we're going to get into that a little bit. That would be fun.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just here for the ride.
Good. It's great.
I'm Andrew, also from Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a senior English and history major. I think I first read it maybe 3rd or 4th grade, and it was like the fun book that you could still take to adoration when it was really boring. So from a young age, I've looked on Middle Earth as a sacred place, as probably the best fictional place ever created by man. So I'm interested in studying the sacrality of it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. It's great.
I'm Margaret, also from Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm a freshman, and we have similar background stories of Tolkien because we're siblings. And just like growing up with older siblings, being obsessed with the movies and reading the books, and just like very present in my life. And I wanted to read them, and I did read them and didn't get much out of them, so I'm excited to read them again when I'm older.
That's great. Well, you guys also have not just Tolkien, you've got Willa Cather in Nebraska. She's amazing, absolutely amazing. So good. Well, great, guys. Thank you. So really good. And I don't have everybody's names down yet. So when you talk, go ahead and tell me your names again. And it's going to be a little bit of trouble for me memorizing everyone just because we're meeting only once a week. And a few of you I know. Some of you I know really well. But so that won't be a problem. But just keep telling me your names as we go along, and it'll help everybody else too. Do you pretty much all know each other? Or is that okay? So it's kind of mixed too. So good. So if we all tell our names as we're going along, that'd be great. Okay, so there's a lot I want to cover today. And I would like us to take, I thought maybe we could have used the other day, maybe just like a 5-minute break in the middle. At least I could have. So maybe I'll do that in about 50 minutes into it. We can take 5 minutes and then come back into it. And I plan on us finishing around 1:30 today. So that's how long I'd like to go. I don't know if you guys know, poor Dr. Pongrasic, he and his wife say they have the worst flu they've ever had. So I have to go get medicine and drop it off at their, I'm going to put it on their porch and run. But I have to go do that right after class. They're great. I don't know if you know Yvonne. He's an amazing guy. Fantastic. But anyway, so there's a lot I want to cover. And I want us still to talk about the Silmarillion, but I'd like to wait on that for just a little bit and talk about some of these other things to try and put the Silmarillion in perspective and think about the kinds of things that we were talking last week with the 3 elements that really make up Tolkien's Christianity when it comes to the Lord of the Rings itself and his mythology. And if you remember, as we had talked about with those 3 things, there was first the idea of symbolism. So when we look at someone like Gandalf, who clearly has a Saint Michael element, but also has a very Odinic element to him, so he is both pagan as well as Christian, and then he's very Tolkienian as well. Or something like the Limbos, which is clearly meant to be the Eucharist. Those are the kinds of things we find obviously in Tolkien's symbolism. But then the second thing that I had mentioned was this idea that there's also something deeply rooted in the very structure of Tolkien's mythology that is also rooted in Christianity, especially in the idea of man as sub-creator as opposed to being creator. And then the third thing, which I think is really important as well, is Tolkien's love of language and of the word. And how do we take mythology? Does mythology come before language, or does language come before mythology? Something we can't really answer, but remember Tolkien's answer was that we have the story and then we invent language to explain what that story is. We'll never know if that's true or not, of course, not on this side of eternity. It's one of the things that I plan on asking God when we get to the, God willing, when we get to the other side. It's something that I'm very curious about, but we won't find that out here and now. But it's a great argument. A beautiful argument to think about what does that mean. So that's really, surprisingly, even though it took us an hour and a half last week, that's pretty much what we got through, those 3 ideas, and then started looking at the Silmarillion. So as we get into this, I would like to keep lecturing a bit on what Tolkien has to say about fairy stories and what he tells us fairy is. And remember, and this is, we didn't talk about this yet, but, for us in this day and age, fairy has kind of a corrupted meaning. It means something usually dealing with homosexual culture. That, of course, was not in any way, thanks Cecilia, that was not in any way, shape, or form an aspect of Tolkien's understanding of it when he was a young man. Not that I'm sure he knew, especially in Oxford, he would have known people who were same-sex oriented, but that was not what he means by the idea of fairy. There was this great poster in World War One, two great posters. One is a poster of Kitchener, who was the head of the English army, and he's in uniform, and he's pointing at you, and he says, "I want you to be a member of this army." That was the kind of poster that was used throughout all the rural areas of England. And we do the same thing in America, where we've got the Uncle Sam poster, "I want you." But in very civilized areas of England, places like St. Andrews or at Oxford or at Cambridge, the posters that went up to recruit people for World War One literally said, "Defend Fairyland." And Fairyland was England. That's how they thought of it. So again, it has nothing to do with sexuality at all, but it had everything to do, hi Liam, had everything to do with the image of who and what we are as citizens of England. And so Tolkien grows up in the Edwardian period and in the late Victorian period and then into the Georgian period. And during those periods, fairy meant England. It was a way of understanding it. So when Tolkien starts writing about his notion of the fairies, it is deeply rooted in his understanding of England overall. And if you guys had a chance to read that letter at the beginning of the Silmarillion, he says quite clearly that he believes that the only thing his soil is lacking is a mythology. And he was planning on dedicating the whole mythology to England. And specifically, he wanted to give it to the Queen. He wanted to give it to Elizabeth. And he had a great reverence for Elizabeth. He wanted to, she would have been a very, very young woman when he was in his middle age. But he very much wanted, hoped that he would be able to hand it to her and give her the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings as a way of giving England a mythology. And again, remember what he said in that letter. He loves the Arthurian legend. In fact, we now know that he tried to write his own Arthurian legend, which we had known about since about 1974, but it didn't see publication until the last decade, the fall of Arthur, and it's not completed, but it's still really, really interesting. But notice what Tolkien says, and I want us to ponder this, especially as we're thinking through all of our classes this semester. He says the reason that he doesn't like the Arthurian legend, and he means that at a certain level, because at one level he loves the Arthurian legend, but the reason he doesn't believe that it's worthy of being a mythology for England is for two reasons. Number one, it's too Celtic. And of course, we know from the writers of the Rohirrim and Tolkien's love of Beowulf, he's very, very connected to the Anglo-Saxon part of England, the actual English part of England, not to the Celtic part of England, though he respects it, definitely. He respects it. So he's playing around with that. But the other thing, and this is what I want us to think about this whole semester, he says, Arthur's too Christian. Now, why would a devout Christian, a daily Mass Catholic, why would a devout Christian say that Arthur can't be the myth of England because it's too Christian? You guys have an idea about that? What's he mean by that? Cecilia, thank you.
Because England wasn't always Christian.
Okay, right. And Tolkien. Yeah, go ahead, Cecilia. I'm sorry.
I just said it has a lot of pagan roots.
Mm-hmm. And it's clear Tolkien likes those pagan roots, right? He's not rejecting them. He still thinks they need to be baptized. But, Tolkien turns around and says the Lord of the Rings in 1956, he says it's fundamentally a Catholic, not just a Christian, but a Catholic work. So why is it okay for him but not for Arthur? Or the creator of the Arthurian? Nolan?
Could it have something to do with Arthur being a Christian figure? Like he's following after the story of the, quote, one true myth.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is that Lewis looks at myths as these shattered fragments of a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in a way, maybe it's not, if he's trying to add one more shard,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Arthur has too much of the whole of the mirror in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very good guess. Really good stab at it. Anybody else? Yeah.
Perhaps because
Andrew.
if you're literally a Christian in the story, it means that you can't exist outside of this world
Yeah.
because Christ is the dominant figure in this world.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. I think there's something about the Lord of the Rings for Tolkien where Christ is through the story rather than the story. Right? I think that's how he's thinking about it. So the structure is Christian, but his characters are not. And remember, we talked about this last week, and Tolkien verified this. I'm not making this up. Right? Tolkien said that you've got the three offices of Christ. You've got the priest, Frodo, you've got the prophet, Gandalf, and you've got the king, Aragorn. But none of them are Christ. And Tolkien, somewhat famously or infamously, didn't really like Narnia. And I think part of the reason he didn't like Narnia is because Aslan is too clearly Jesus. And I think that made someone like Tolkien uncomfortable, that you would make Jesus a lion and that he would speak and say things that are not in the Gospels. So I don't know that, but that's my guess with someone like Tolkien. So Arthur, too, you think about the Arthurian legend, especially about his desire to get the Grail. It's so deeply rooted in every aspect of Christianity that you can't really distance yourself from it and see it as a part of the whole, but rather, and I like the way you put it, Nolan, you've got these shards of things that he's looking at. Okay, well, let me read to you a little bit of what Tolkien says in his 1939 On Fairy Stories lecture. And I almost assigned this to you guys for the semester, but I really thought with the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, that was enough for us to get through for 2 credits. I think if I do this again, which I will, God willing, if I do this as a 3 credit, I'll probably assign this book as well. But I would, and I also have a photocopy of this if anyone wants it, a PDF. I can just send it to you guys, so just let me know if you want it. I won't clog up your inbox unless you want it, but I will send it to you. So this is the book that Tolkien started. It was put together by a Tolkien scholar, but it's a number of his essays, his variations on this essay that he gave on fairy stories in St. Andrews in 1939. And really, his most careful look at what mythology is. And it's fascinating because the way he presents it, there is no great distinction between what he calls fairy and fantasy and myth. They're all related in some way. They're not the same thing. They're different, but they're all really related. And so for the purposes of our class, I'm going to use those fairly interchangeably. But this is how he begins this on fairy stories. He says, I propose to speak about fairy stories, though I am aware that this is a rash adventure. Fairy is a perilous land, and in it are pitfalls for the unwary and dungeons for the overbold. And overbold I may be accounted, for though I have been a lover of fairy stories since I learned to read, and have at times thought about them, I have not studied them professionally. I have been hardly more than a wandering explorer or trespasser in the land full of wonder but not of information. That's typical British manners. Right? He's downplaying what he's done here. He has actually done a lot on fairy, and he's done a lot on mythology. At the time that he is giving this lecture, he has already published The Hobbit, and it's won all kinds of awards. And he's in the beginning of writing The Lord of the Rings. So the idea that he hasn't studied this is a bit absurd. But he means it at a professional level, not at a level of avocation, but a level of professionalism. And so that's what he means when he says, I haven't really studied this. But it is a little bit of false humility on his part. For the realm of fairy story is wide and deep and high and filled with many things. All manners of beasts and birds are found there, shoreless seas and stars uncounted, beauty that is an enchantment and an ever-present peril, both joy and sorrow as sharp as swords. In that realm, a man may perhaps count himself fortunate to have wandered, but its very richness and strangeness tie the tongue of the traveler who would report them. And while he is there, it is dangerous for him to ask too many questions, lest the gate should be shut and the keys be lost. So notice what he says here, this argument about what fairy is. It really is this thing right next to us, and yet it's almost impossible to go into. And so for Lewis, it's Narnia. You go through the wardrobe to get to it. For Rowling, it's Diagon Alley. You go through it to get to it. There's always this kind of way. And you think about The Hobbit, Bilbo. Bilbo is in the Shire. The Shire is normal. But to get outside of the Shire, you have to go through the Old Forest or whatever it may be to get to Bree. And then beyond Bree, you enter into Wilderland. And you're entering into fairy. So I'm not sure if I would describe it exactly like I did 20 years ago. But when I wrote about this 20 years ago, I described fairy as essentially a kind of angelic realm that is kind of going into a realm that's beyond us, but next to us. So a realm of eternal cosmic combat where Saint Michael and Lucifer are wrestling over the devil, wrestling over the body of Moses, right? That, as we see in the book of Jude, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's quite fair, because I think there are elements in Tolkien's fairy that are probably more purgatorial than they are just angelic. I think it's still very Catholic on his part, but I'm not sure you really step into it if you step into an angelic world or a world of cosmic battles, but I think it hints at it. So again, I'm not sure I would agree with my 35-year-old self, but I do think there's an element there that can be taken seriously about what that means. And the fact that Gandalf, as Tolkien very bluntly says, that he is an order of angel, there is something powerful about his witness and how he shows up. And then this is Tolkien as well, a few pages in. He says, fairy contain many things besides elves and fays, besides dwarves and witches and trolls and giants and dragons. It holds the sea and the sun, the moon, the sky, the earth, and all things that are in it, tree and bird, water and stone, bread and wine, ourselves, mortal men, when we are enchanted. And so again, I don't think for Tolkien we can say it's something that's just over there, because when Tolkien says it's bread and wine, I think he's very clearly referring to communion. And I think that he's saying that when we partake of the Eucharist, we're entering fairy in some way, that is an element of mythology. And, again, I'm not asking, I know we're from all different faiths in here, though I would assume that most of us are Christian or come from a Christian background, given that we're at a Christian college. But let me just say this from a Catholic standpoint, and you guys forgive me for being theologically Catholic for a moment, but just for the sake of argument, imagine what happens when a Catholic, from his or her belief, when they take communion. Think about the whole process that has gone into that. God gave us wheat. We plant the wheat. We take the wheat and process it into bread, and we take unleavened bread and we give it to the priest. The priest then says the one prayer that has been said since the Last Supper, and he sanctifies that piece of wheat given to us by God, remade by human hands, sanctified by God. So kind of perfect loop. And when we take communion, we believe that we are taking communion with every single person who will have ever taken communion, past, present, and future, that it's all one sacrifice. That's pretty sci-fi. when you think about it, right? That's Doctor Who kind of time travel as you're thinking about what that sacred moment means. And I realize if you guys aren't Catholic, if you're Orthodox, you're with me on this, but if you're not Catholic, I can see how you might be that's a little weird. But I just want you guys to know the argument for it, that it is, every time we take communion, it's meant to be a mystical experience. And if you're Lutheran, it's not that much different either, right? It's the moment that the minister and the communicant and the wafer touch, Christ is present, right? The real presence is there. That's really mystical and not something that can be proven by science. So that's why, and I think my 35-year-old self was pretty convinced that Tolkien saw fairy as acts of grace, as a kind of sacramental life. But it can't be just that, because when we go into fairy, we also go into an utterly perilous realm, something where even our greatest achievement as man is but the lowest thing in fairy. So I think that's a hard thing to try and grasp what Tolkien is getting at there. So I do believe that the Mass is meant to be fairy. I think it's an entering into fairy. And I guess if maybe the perilous aspect would be if we're not worthy of communion, we are condemning ourselves to our own death. If we take communion unworthily, maybe that's the perilous part. But again, so is this making sense? What I'm saying here with this idea of what a sacrament might be and how it seems to play a role in this. But again, Tolkien is also, it's not just elves and fays, but it's also dwarves and witches and trolls and giants and dragons. So there's a lot of evil in fairy as well. It's not just receiving communion. There's a lot of danger to it in everything that we do. Well, let me jump forward just a little bit, and I always love this. Just a couple of things. One, just a kind of a point of wisdom that Tolkien gives us. This is just in the middle of his lecture. He says, "Let me remind each other that history often resembles myth because they are both ultimately of the same stuff." I know you're not all history majors in here, but for those of you who've had me before in class, this is kind of the thesis of everything I teach, right? There's very little division between myth and fact in my classes because I'm not always sure what's myth and what's fact. And I think when we're talking about someone like George Washington, where does the myth end and where does the fact begin? It's very hard. And I think it's healthy. I mean, obviously I do, or I wouldn't have taught it that way. But so when I come into a myth class, a literature class, well, I'm bringing history in the same way I bring literature in my history classes. And I think Tolkien, understands that and gets that these things are ultimately of the same stuff. But here's what I want to read at a little bit of length from. And Tolkien says about the nature of what myth is. So you guys just kind of sit back and absorb this for a bit. Let me talk about a study, an academic study. The study may indeed become depressing. It is easy for the student to feel that with all his labor, he is collecting only a few leaves, many of them now torn or decayed, from the countless foliage of the tree of tales with which the forest of days is carpeted. It seems vain to add to this litter. You guys just imagine. Think about fall before they come through with those obnoxious wind machines and blow everything away. Think about all the leaves that have fallen, yellow, red, gold, orange, sometimes still green, sometimes a mix of all three. And if you guys walk up by the cemetery, the colors are just gorgeous and the sun is shining through and the atmosphere is different because it's yellow or it's orange or it's red. And then you get to kick the pile of leaves. I think one of the greatest joys of being human, just going up and kicking a pile of leaves, right? It's just, and you get that instant dust smell, and it's a unique smell, but just brilliant. That's what Tolkien is telling us, right? And what is I write another book. What is it? It's just one more leaf in the pile, right? Or at least it can feel that way. Just one more leaf in the forest of days. So who among us can design a new leaf? The patterns from bud to unfolding, the colors from spring to autumn, they were all discovered by men long ago. But that's not entirely true. The seed of a tree can be replanted in almost any soil, even one so smoke-ridden as that of England. Spring is, of course, not really less beautiful because we have seen or heard of other like events. Like events never from beginnings or the world's beginning to the world's end, the same event. For let us remember that each leaf of oak and ash and thorn is a unique embodiment of the pattern. Okay, that's pretty amazing. I know we have this saying that's kind of trite, no two snowflakes are ever the same, but it works with leaves. And leaves are more interesting than snowflakes in a lot of ways because there are a lot of different species of trees. And so you pick up an oak leaf, we know exactly what it looks like. You pick up a maple leaf, we know exactly what it looks like. But no two maple leaves in the entire history of the world have ever been identical. Ever. They're all unique. And so we see that every spring. And think about, and I try to remind myself of this, and at 58, time is getting shorter for me. And I hope you guys do as well. I hope you never take it for granted. Every fall is beautiful. And I always have fall's melancholic for it's my favorite season by far. And I love Ray Bradbury, and I love everything I love Halloween. I think Halloween should be a sacred festival. I love it in every way. But there's always a melancholic part of me that always says, again, at my age, is this going to be my last fall? Is this the last one I'll ever see? And if so, I better not take this one for granted. And here we are. I would much, much, much rather be in 13-degree weather than I would be in humidity. I'm not going to take this for granted that we get this today. And I'm still going to go take my dog for a walk. And he loves it. Oh my gosh, does he love it. And he loves the snow and he loves the cold. Absolutely loves it. And it'll be a great afternoon when I go take my dog for a walk. I do it every day. And I try really hard just to enjoy the snow, what it is. And that's what Tolkien is getting at here. There's a romantic element in saying, don't take this for granted. Even though you guys are 21, 22, 23, 24, you've seen 24 autumns. You've seen 24 winters. You've seen 24 summers, 24 springs. They're all great, every one of them. Right? And so, what did I do by writing a new book? I just added to the pile. But maybe I said something worth saying. Maybe my leaf will be the one that someone will pick up and say, holy Moses, this matters. Right? That's what we recognize, that beauty. And so he tells us we certainly do not despair of drawing, because all lines must be either curved or straight, nor of painting, because there are only 3 primary colors. We may indeed be older now, insofar as we are heirs in enjoyment or in practice of many generations of the ancestors in our arts. In this inheritance of wealth, and it is an inheritance of wealth, there may be a danger of boredom or of anxiety, or to be original, or that this may lead to a distaste for fine drawing, delicate patterns, or pretty colors, or else to a mere manipulation and over-elaboration of old material, clever and heartless. But the true road of escape from such wariness is not to be found in the willfully awkward, clumsy, or misshapen, not in making all things dark or unremittingly violent, nor in mixing the colors on through subtlety to drabness and the fantastical complication of shapes to the point of silliness on towards delirium. Before we reach such states, we need recovery. We should look at green again and be startled. We should be startled by the color green, but not blinded. And then we should look at blue and yellow and red. And then we should meet the centaur and the dragon, and then perhaps suddenly behold, like the ancient shepherds, how interesting sheep, dogs, horses, and wolves actually are. This is the recovery that fairy stories help us to make. In this sense only is a taste for them. It may make us, or dare I say, it may keep us childlike. Right, that's just gorgeous. And I want you guys to put this in context for a moment. This is 1939, the spring of 1939. And remember what I told you last week. He is speaking to a group of atheist academics, and he is bringing the gospel to them. And he wants them to remember what it means to be Christian. Think about March of 1939. If you were an Englishman and you looked out on the world, it would look like all of hell had broken loose. The Nazis just having taken over Austria and the Sudetenland, on the verge of taking over Poland. The Russians moving everywhere with the dread of communism. And the world would just, and you're on this little British isle, this one island of sanity in a world of hell. And of course, what is Tolkien telling us? He's not talking about leaves. He's talking about men and women. You know, if each leaf is different, how more amazing is it that each one of us is different? And unlike the leaf, we have free will. We get to choose our morality. And that's what Tolkien is getting at here. And this speech that he gives is a deeply Christian humanist speech. It's a speech about what it means to be fundamentally human and to enjoy that and to believe in that and not to be ashamed of that. And you know, just think about this in this class for a moment. What would you guys think of me if we went around and you guys all introduced yourself, and in my head I thought, oh yeah, Emma, fallen person. Liam, fallen person. Anna, fallen person. It's all true. You guys are just as fallen as I am. There's no question about that. But wasn't it a lot more interesting to find out where they're from and why they like Tolkien? You know, I mean, I could walk around thinking, okay, fallen human being. But my gosh, what kind of world would it be? Wouldn't it be better to look at Anna and say, wow, I see the light of Christ in her? That's interesting, right? That's really interesting. Our sin is boring. It's so boring. Being fallen is boring. It's important, but it's boring, right? It's the thing that, it's like tapioca. It's what we all have in common with one another. But our excellences, that's what makes us who we are, right? Those excellences, and they're gifts of God. They're his gifts. And so that's why when we read something like the Silmarillion, and we read all of the Valar looking at their gifts, think about what they did. They each get to see a part of themselves in creation. And that's what we do, right? This class, you know, not just this class, all classes, but this class matters. We're doing something. We're thinking about things. We're thinking about things that matter. And yeah, I mean, how many of you just told me that your dads read this story to you? Well, that's going to be you in 10 years. You're going to be reading this to your kids, and you're going to think about these things, and you're going to think, yeah, I'm passing this on to the next generation. And it matters, just like it mattered for you, it mattered for me. You know, I got it from my two brothers. My mom never read this to me, but my two brothers told me, yeah, you've got to read Tolkien. And I was the youngest of three. One brother's 8 years older, the other's 5. Of course, I worship the ground they walk on. And yeah, I better read Tolkien. And they used to encourage me to read Tolkien. They would give me notes written in Tolkien's ruins, and I would have to transcribe them and figure them out. And then they would have treasure hunts. Those were two good brothers, right? Really, it's still great, but you know, amazing. So that's the kind of thing, and I want us to realize that when we're talking about Tolkien, And a couple of you said this as well. The mythology matters. Tolkien is the greatest myth maker since Dante. He is the greatest myth maker since Dante. Dante is the greatest myth maker since Virgil. And Virgil is the greatest myth maker since Homer. But that puts Tolkien in really rarefied air to say that. And I firmly believe that. I don't believe that's just hyperbole on my part. I really believe that someday, 500 years from now, people will read Tolkien like we read Dante. They will be studying him in the same way. And that's incredible. So think about this. And I brought him up last week, and I'll bring him up again because I have a love-hate relationship with him. Think about someone who makes everything unremittingly violent. Stephen King. I mean, that guy has a great imagination. But, when you have to take 5 pages to describe a rape in your novel, maybe you need to reconsider what you're doing. Right? Can you imagine Tolkien ever explaining evil to us? No. We never get in the mind of evil. We see the results of what happened, but we don't know what Sauron is thinking because Tolkien doesn't want us to. That would be playing with something unremittingly violent. We don't get that. We get a glimpse with Saruman, but Saruman's just a shadow of Sauron. He's not the real deal. He's a counterfeit. And so we learn what he's doing, but he comes across like an idiot because we know he's failed in every way. And we see that. Treebeard nature has bested him in every way. So we're going to see that repeatedly. And again, I firmly believe this. When Tolkien tells us these are leaves, he's really talking about us. He's talking about human beings overall. Okay, last thing I want to read today, and then let's take a quick break, just like a 3-4 minute break. But this is what Tolkien says. One of the great charges leveled against anyone who writes about this idea of fantasy or myth or fairy is that they can't handle reality and that they're just escaping from the world. Tolkien says this: wouldn't it be possible for a rational man, after reflection, even quite unconnected to myth or fairy or romance, to arrive at the condemnation, implicit at least in mere silence of escapist literature, of progressive things like factories and machine guns and bombs that appear to me to be all the inexorable products of progressivism? Isn't that great? It's like, you are the people with the weird imaginations. I've got a good imagination. I don't come up with ways to kill another person. I come up with ways to glorify another person. Those are radically different things, right? And that, I think, so Tolkien is brilliant about this. Okay, last thing. Lewis and Tolkien were once having a very, very serious debate about exactly why so many progressives hate escape. And you guys, I hope you know, just politically, culturally, Tolkien and Lewis are reactionary. They're not just conservative. They're like really crazy conservative in their politics and their ideas, amazingly so. But Tolkien just looked at Lewis and he said to him, remember, the only people who hate escape are jailers. It's great. Okay, 3-minute break. You guys run to the restroom or grab a coffee or something. And we'll pick it back up in just a moment. Okay, good guys. Welcome back from the break. I would like for a bit for us to read the poem Mythopoeia. And I'll give you just a quick background to this. Mythopoeia was Tolkien's gift to Lewis after he converted to Christianity. And so this was written probably sometime in late 1931, early 1932. And it definitely reflects their friendship. And I think it's one of Tolkien's best poems. And I don't know if you guys have seen, he wrote so much poetry that it's now come out as a 3-volume set. and beautiful set. But wrote a lot. But I'd like to start, if you guys don't mind, I'd like somebody to read. I'd like to start on the third stanza, yet trees are not trees, with that kind of Adamic state. So, trees are not trees. What's your name again?
Zealand.
Zealand, that's right. Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
Yet trees are not trees until so named and seen, and never were so named till those had seen whose speeches involuted breath unfurled, faint echo and dim picture of the world, but neither record nor photograph, being divination, judgment, and a laugh, response of those who felt a stir within by deep monition movements that were kin to life and death of trees, of beasts, of stars, free captives undermining shadowy bars, digging the foreknown from experience and panning the vein of spirit out of sense. Great powers they slowly brought out of themselves, and looking backward they beheld elves that wrought on cunning forges in the mind, and light and dark on secret looms entwined. He sees no stars who does not see them first, of living silver made that sudden burst, to flame like flowers beneath an ancient song, whose very echo after music long has since pursued. There is no firmament, only a void, unless a jeweled tent myth-woven in elf pattern, and no earth, unless the mother's womb whence all have birth. The heart of man is not compound of lies, but draws some wisdom from the only wise, and still recalls him. Though now long estranged, man is now wholly lost, nor wholly changed. Disgraced he may be, yet is not dethroned, and keeps the rags of lordship one he owned, his world dominion by creative act, not his to worship the great artifact. Man, sub-creator, the reflected light through whom is splintered from a single white to many hues, and endlessly combined in living shapes that move from mind to mind. Though all the crannies of the world we filled with elves and goblins, though we dared to build gods in their houses out of dark and light, and sow the seeds of dragons, 'twas our right, used or misused. The right was not decayed. We make still by the law in which we're made.
Okay, Zealand, let's stop there. Thank you. It was excellent. Okay, so let's talk about this, especially that last stanza. The heart of man is not compound of lies, but draws some wisdom from only the wise and still recalls him. What is that? Compare that to what we were just talking about before our break. And what does he mean by that? What's he suggesting here? Justin?
Basically, he's saying that we are fallen, but we haven't fully lost that image. We still remember what it is to create. We still have that idea of our role as in communion with God, caring for creation, and carrying out the act of creation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put. So there's something in the very beauty of humanity. And I want us all, just for a moment, you think about the incarnation. In the incarnation, Word becomes flesh. Christ takes on our image. That's amazing. Because obviously in Genesis we're made in His image. But in the incarnation, He takes on our image. He becomes us. And so no matter how fallen we are, we can always say through our faith, yes, but our God became one of us. Now, we killed Him, but He became one of us, and He conquered death. But that's stunning to think about what that means. And so Tolkien tells us, right, well, with the fall, we're dethroned, and we may be we're disgraced, but we're not yet dethroned, right? We still have the rags of lordship once He owned. And so what is our role as man? Did you guys catch this? What is our job then? Margaret, what's our job? To subcreate, right? To create. And yet never to worship our creation, right? That's where the Gnostics get it wrong. They're great creators, but then they worship what they've created. And that's the danger. So we know that mythology calls every one of us because it's so powerful and it tells us who and what we are, right? You think we've got the Logos, but then we've got the mythos, We have the story and we have the word, and we have to balance those two things. So we still make in the same way. Okay, Zealand did really well. Who else would like to read from here? So, Magdalena, would you mind? So yes, wish fulfillment dreams.
Where are we? Oh. Yes, wish fulfillment dreams we spin to cheat, but timid hearts and ugly fact defeat. Whence came the wish, and whence the power to dream? Or some things fair and others ugly seem? All wishes are not idle, nor in vain fulfillment we devise, for pain is pain. Not for itself to be desired, but ill, or else to strive, or to subdue the will. Alike we're graceless, and of evil this alone is dreadly certain, evil is. Blessed are the timid hearts that evil hate, that quail in its shadow, and yet shut the gate, that seek no parley, and in guarded room, though small and bare, upon a clumsy loom, leave tissues gilded by the far-off day, hoped and believed, in undershadowed sway. Blessed are the men of Noah's race, that build their little arks, though frail and poorly filled, and steer through winds contrary towards a rape, a rumor of a harbor guessed by fate. Blessed are the legend makers with their rhyme of things not found within recorded tongue. It is not they that have forgot the night or bid us flee to organize the light, and lotus isles of economic bliss, forswearing souls to gain a Circe kiss, and counterfeit at that machine produced bogus seduction for twice seduced. Such isles they saw afar, and ones more fair, and those that hear them yet may yet beware. They have seen death and ultimate defeat, and yet they would not in despair retreat, but off to victory have turned the lyre, and kindled hearts with legendary fire, illuminating now and dark hath been, with light of suns as yet by no man seen.
Okay, let's stop there. Great job, Magdalena. Okay, let's talk about this. What's Tolkien getting at here? And why does it matter that we tell tales? It's not just because we're imitating God. What else is it? Josh?
I love the blessed are paragraphs. It's sort of like a beatitudes for story makers.
Yep.
And the arcs, they might be little and frail and poorly filled, but there's still, reflections of like the arc, right? Like they're stories that are going to get us through the evil which we might not be able to comprehend, but we know it's there and that we have to defend ourselves from.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, one of the reasons we tell tales is because we're trying to bring the human out of our fellow human beings. Right? So we could tell a tale that would depress us all, and sometimes those are necessary, but the best kind of tales are heroic, ones about virtue. And so we don't just want organized delight. We don't want to be controlled. We don't want to be bureaucratized. We don't want to be smothered in rules. There's Tolkien's conservatism coming out there. We don't want that. Right? This thing of a lotus isle of economic bliss for swearing souls to gain a Circe kiss, and counterfeited that machine-produced bogus seduction of the twice seduced. So this is going to be something that we're going to talk about a lot when we get to the Shire and the Lord of the Rings. One of the things that Tolkien and Lewis believed, and you can agree or disagree with it, but I want you guys to know the argument. The argument is this: fallen man still lives in a garden. Not the garden anymore, but we make our gardens, we grow our food. And so fallen man is still man pointed towards God, even though he's fallen. So every time I get up with the sun, or I go to bed with the sun, or I do a certain thing in spring that's different than in summer or in fall or winter, I'm living according to God's creation. But what do machines do? Machines exist to dominate creation. And therefore, when we make machines, we're turning away from God. So that's why Tolkien says we're doubly fallen, right? At that point. I'm not saying I agree with this, and with my Apple Watch and my recorder and everything, I'd be a little hypocritical to say technology does that. But I understand the argument that he's trying to make. And so it's not that man who is a machine maker can't be redeemed. It's that he has a doubly hard time of redemption because he's pointed towards his own ingenuity rather than towards God's. Because that, again, you guys don't have to agree with that, but I want you to, and I can imagine if we had any of the economists in this room right now, it's like, oh my gosh, Tolkien is, and rightly so, but that they would not appreciate this sentiment here. But that's Tolkien in New Zealand.
What section is that?
Oh, that the blessed are the legend makers with their rhyme of things not found within recorded time. And there at the end of that, the lotus isles of economic bliss for swearing souls to gain a Circe kiss, and counterfeited that machine-produced bogus seduction of the twice seduced. Right, so that we're kind of twice fallen at that point. So, okay, anybody else on this part? Okay, another volunteer. Let's see, you in the white, Joe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. You had volunteered. Do you mind?
Yes.
Take us to the end.
Starting at
I would that I might.
I would that I might with a minstrel's song and stir the unseen with a throbbing string. I would be with the mariners of the deep that cut their slender planks on mountains steep and voyage upon a vague and wandering quest. For some have passed beyond the fabled west. I would with the beleaguered fools be told that keep an inner fastness where their gold, impure and scanty, yet they loyally bring to mint an image blurred of distant king, or in fantastic banners weave the sheen, heraldic emblems of a lord unseen. I will not walk with your progressive apes, erect and sapient. Before them gapes the dark abyss to which their progress tends. If by God's mercy progress ever ends, and does not ceaselessly revolve the same unfruitful course with changing of a name, I will not treat your dusty path and flat, denoting this and that by this and that, your world immutable wherein no part the little maker has with maker's art. I bow not yet before the iron crown, nor cast my own small golden scepter down. In paradise, perchance, the eye may stray from gazing upon everlasting day to see the day illumined, and renew from mirrored truth the likeness of the true. In looking on the blessed land, 'twill see that all is as it is, and yet made free. Salvation changes not, nor yet destroys garden, nor gardener, children, nor their toys. Evil it will not see, for evil lies not in God's picture, but in crooked eyes. Not in the source, but in malicious choice, and not in sound, but in the tuneless voice. In paradise they look no more awry, and though they make anew, they make no lie. But sure they still will make, not being dead, and poets shall have flames upon their head, and harps whereon their faultless fingers fall, there each shall choose forever from the all.
Okay, that was great, Joe. Thank you. All right, I love, and I hope you guys caught this as well, I love his conservatism in the sense that the progressives are just apes, right? That's all they are. I will not walk with your progressive apes, erect and sapient. Before them gapes the dark abyss to which their progress tends, if by God's mercy progress ever ends. So he's throwing down the gauntlet there pretty clearly in the way that he's approaching his theory of history, his theory of culture, theology, everything. And that you see, Tolkien and Lewis described themselves as old Western men. Right? That was how they viewed themselves, fighting this idea of progressivism. But that, and you can imagine, and I don't know if you guys have seen this fairly recently, but there have been all kinds of articles about how dangerous it is to give Tolkien to your kids because they may grow up conservative, right? That's you see that all over the place, and they're right. They're absolutely right about that. I mean, to take Tolkien seriously is to fight the modern world. I don't think there's any question about that, and modernity becomes suspect. Okay, let's if you guys don't mind, let's go like 20 more minutes. And I want to throw it open to you. We did this last week. Cecilia did a great reading from the Silmarillion. I want to throw the Silmarillion open for discussion for a bit before we get into the Lord of the Rings. And I'm curious, and I realize you probably didn't all get through it, and that's okay. Hopefully you got through a chunk of it. But it is difficult because there are so many names and so many dates, and we have no narrator, right? Which is really hard. Tolkien said in his letters that if he could, he would have made Bilbo the narrator of this. But that's not something that Christopher felt comfortable doing when he finished the Silmarillion. So what do you guys, let's just throw about, really anything out. What's your reaction to reading this book? Any micro, macro, anything. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really curious, especially in The Legend of Beren and Luthien, the themes or the tropes that are present in the Silmarillion that are repeated in The Lord of the Rings, and maybe you could help us identify more of those. Obviously, like Beren, Luthien, Aragorn, and Arwen.
Right.
And the Silmarils of the Rings, and but if you could speak more to that.
Yeah, and remember remember the poem, the Iron Crown, right? That's Sauron's Iron Crown, right? And that's so even that poem is referencing Beren stealing the Silmaril in the poem that we just had. So that's all part of this as well. So Tolkien, if you go to his grave today, Tolkien's grave says Beren, and his wife's grave says Luthien. So he very much mythologized his own relationship with his wife. And really the story of Beren and Luthien is at the heart of the Silmarillion. I would say that it's I don't know if it's the most important story, but it's the story that ties together everything, because it ties together the gods, the Valar, it ties together the elves, and it ties together men. And of course, without Beren and Luthien, we would never have Elrond, and we wouldn't have Aragorn and Arwen either. So their whole line of Beren and Luthien, and Luthien being the daughter of Melian, Melian being the instructor of Galadriel. So all of that is happening here, and that's where it's very tied in. And we'll do this when we get to that part in the Lord of the Rings. But I want you guys to imagine this for a moment. When Aragorn tells the tale of Beren and Luthien, it's moments before they're attacked at Weathertop. And it's basically a prayer. He's offering a prayer and looking back to their ancestors, more of a kind of stoic prayer than a Christian prayer, but it is a kind of prayer. It's centering all of them to prepare for battle. And we'll see that Sam, remember at 1.2, suddenly prays in Elvish, a language he doesn't know, but he speaks in perfect Elvish. And it's a moment where, this is great. God has given him the grace to speak the language and to say the prayer. Right? And that's an amazing thing. So Beren and Luthien, Joe, I'm very glad you brought it up, because it really is, I think, the central story. And remember the dog, Juan, right? Incredible character. He only speaks 3 times. It's deeply mythological. Think about Sauron appearing as a vampire, and then the werewolves, and it's a gothic horror story in almost every way. So yeah, I think that's really great. What struck you, Joe?
Yeah, I was curious about their decision to live as mortal. I think if that's, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but their
No, you're right.
to choose to not go to the land of the West, and just maybe the theological implications that Tolkien is kind of getting at.
Oh, sure.
Philosophical decision that Arwen wrestles with in Lord of the Rings as well. Like, never quite understood what Tolkien is getting at there. But
yeah. So in Tolkien's mythology, there is this glorious, kind of quasi-purgatorial, but it's not suffering, realm called the Blessed Realm, where the gods live. And so the elves, when they die, they go to the halls of Mandos. And so their souls, and they can be reincarnated. The elves can be reincarnated. They can come back as other beings. And Tolkien really wrestled with that a lot. Like, was that Catholic? Was it not? What could he do with that? Because that's a pretty wacky kind of idea, really. But we don't know in the mythology, we don't know what happens to men's souls. It's a mystery. We as Christians know, but they in the story don't know. And so for Luthien to give up the cycles of the world. She's giving up eternity for a mystery. And that's why her love is so important, because she's willing to forsake what she knows to be true for what might be true. Does that make sense, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the elves are immortal, and they can only die if they're killed. There's the one who wills herself to death, Feanor's mother, but she's an exception. Mariam, right? Mariel, right? Mariel. She's an exception in all that. So, but normally the elves don't die. But men, even the longest lived man is only 500-600 years old. So most men live 80 years overall. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. I mean, it's really important to all of this, what Tolkien is getting at. Okay, what else about the Silmarillion? And feel free to, if you thought it was hard, that's fine. Say that. Anything. Liam.
I thought the story of Turin was really interesting, and it kind of shot out at me because most of the chapters kind of end happy or at least hopeful. Tolkien always kind of is that way. But this one, it was just like repeated offense made by Turin, mistakes, and then tragedy after tragedy. And you kind of keep waiting for Tolkien to spin it around and have a heroic moment. But even when he kills the dragon, it's kind of like lackluster and like it should have already happened. And then it ends with him ending his own life. And also the death of, how do you say her name? Naniel?
Yeah, Naniel.
Her also committing suicide by jumping in the river. So I don't know, that kind of just spoke out to me as a unique tragedy in a very big book full of usually positive stories.
Yeah. Well, of course, there's still tragedy too with the House of Feanor and everything that goes wrong with the Silmarils. So there's a lot of darkness in the book. You're right, there are some happy things too, but there's a lot of darkness. So Turin's really interesting. It's based on a Finnish myth called the Kulvero. And in that story, it's a rewrite of that story. It was Tolkien's first, as far as we know, that was the first part of the mythology he ever wrote. And he was your age, and he was very intentionally imitating. In fact, he was 21. It was 1913. Yeah, he was 21. He is very intentionally imitating the Finnish story. And that story is about this guy, character, where no matter how hard he tries, everything just goes wrong. He's always called the hapless hero in mythology, in Finnish mythology. And so that Tolkien is drawing upon that. But the interesting thing, and this takes us back to Joe's point as well, Tolkien has this kind of really complicated vision of what the last battle will be. And it's more in his history of Middle-earth than it is in the Silmarillion. But in the last battle, Turin is resurrected. And he actually gets to fight Morgoth in the end. He's a great hero in the last battle, kind of serving like a Saint Michael figure. Manwë, of course, is really, and Manwë's children are really important. But there is, in the apocalypse, Turin will come back and will have a role. So a lot like, and I don't know if Tolkien did this intentionally, but a lot like Cato the Younger in Purgatory for Dante, right? A suicide who still is guarding purgatory itself. So I don't know if that was Tolkien's intention, but there is a kind of mythological trope, because his suicide was out of despair, but there was a kind of stoic element to it. It was more of a stoic suicide than a Christian suicide, I think, in the way that it goes about it. But yeah, that story really, really does stick out. And of course, Tolkien actually, we've only got the chapter, but Tolkien wrote a book-length edition of it called The Children of Hurin, and that's worth looking at as well. We don't have time in this class, but yeah, it's worth looking at the full tale. Good. What else, guys? Yeah, Margaret.
Perhaps I missed it, but Morgoth is the one who first introduces evil, and contrary to Iluvatar, but how do elves and dwarves and men become fallen in the Silmarillion?
Well, in the Silmarillion, the elves become fallen because they take that blasphemous oath against the gods, right? Men are fallen in the way that you would imagine by Adam and Eve, but it's only hinted at. There's in the book Morgoth's Ring. That's volume 10 of the History of Middle Earth. There's a story in there called The Conversation of Finrod and Andreth, where they talk about off stage what happened, and it's clear they're talking about Adam and Eve. So that's in the mythology, but it's not made explicit. The dwarves, it's hard to say if they're fallen or not. Remember, they're made in the image of a lesser god rather than of a Iluvatar, so they already have something against them. But Tolkien, as he said in that letter you guys read, everything is about the fall. Right, he's obsessed with the notion of the fall and redemption. So it is throughout everything, but it happens in a variety of different ways. But Cecilia and I were talking about this last semester, long before this course. But it is interesting if you look at the elves. The elves. So in the Middle Ages, there was this story called the Legend of Saint Michael. And the story goes this, and we know it had an influence on Tolkien. The story is this: that when Satan rebelled, a third of the angels went with him. Saint Michael, who was the least of the angels, then stood up and was the first to stand against Satan, and a third of the angels went with him. That's why Michael went from the lowest to the highest and became an archangel, right, because of that. But there are a third of the angels who took neutrality. And according to the legend, they become elves. They're where the elves come from in medieval thought. And so we don't really know when Tolkien remember, if you're a hobbit and you see an elf, there's a glow about them. So there does seem to be something angelic about what the elves do. Not that they can't, so they can be corrupt, just like Saruman's an elf who's corrupt, right? So it's certainly possible, but Saruman's an angel who goes corrupt, sorry. He's an angel who goes corrupt. And so it is possible, but it does seem to be that the elves have a kind of angelic quality to them in a way that humans don't. So I'm not saying that's definite, but it's a way to think about it. So, good. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how do you think...
Jordan?
Colson.
Colton, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I should say. How do you think we as Christians should deal with the corruption of the Ainur themselves? I'm thinking, as Melkor introduces evil into the world, even into this this mythological heaven that we have, Ale goes and sins against Iluvatar, and it seems to me that he's exposed to evil through Melkor, and he in himself is, I'm assuming, only able to sin this way because he's exposed to evil. And so I'm wondering, is it really his fault that he's trying to actuate his nature, he's trying to subcreate, and he's impatient, and he is in some way showing that he's a little bit corrupted and he makes a mistake. And then I'm also wondering, isn't this blessed realm, this kind of Tolkienian heaven, in some way lesser than it could be because it's now been exposed to evil? And then what are the theological implications for that in Christianity?
Yeah, well, that's why I would say the blessed realm is more of a kind of positive purgatory than it is heaven. I don't think it's meant to be heaven. I think it's meant to be, within the mythology, it's a very, very, very good place, but it's not quite heaven yet. And I think that's where the mystery of men, that's why it's so important, because they actually do get to go to heaven. And Luthien would as well, by having chosen that, but she doesn't know that, right? She can only guess. And the same with Arwen. They can make a guess of what this is, but it's still a mystery to them. But I would say, Colton, your questions are fantastic. And I think there's a lot that we could really delve into that I'd like to kind of pick up more maybe later on, but I'm still going to try and answer you. So, remember when the dwarves are created, the intent of the maker is to imitate God. Whereas when Melkor is doing it, his attempt is to dominate God. And so that's why the dwarves are given life of their own, because even though it was a sin to make them, the intent was good. In the same way, think about in Lewis's The Last Battle, where the young Muslim kid who worships Tash, is that allegiance is taken from Tash to God. That's a very, very Inklings kind of way of thinking. And so, and I can never pronounce his name, Alule, when he does this, he's doing this as a way of praising God rather than denigrating God. And so God recognizes that. But I would say this too, and this is very Catholic, so you may or may not agree with it, but there's no doubt that Tolkien's vision of evil is that evil is the absence of good. It's not a thing in and of itself. It becomes a thing in and of itself. So think about the poem, Evil Is. It becomes autonomous, but it doesn't have its roots in God. It has its roots in free will and our desire to be like God. So Tolkien in his mythology is still keeping Iluvatar free from any kind of darkness. The darkness can only arise because of Melkor's choice and his desire to be God himself. So, but I don't disagree with you. The Blessed Realm is tainted. Right? I think that's clear with Ungoliant. It's clear with the destruction of the trees and the lamps. It's been attacked. There's been a siege of it. So it's not perfect. And that's why I would say it's not heaven, but it's a shadow of heaven in some way. Colton, do you want to follow up?
Do you think Aule is still like a pure being then?
Yeah, he's forgiven.
You don't think he's really sinned?
No, he's forgiven. I mean, just like when we sin and we ask for forgiveness, we're okay after that. The same thing is true for him. So he has done something wrong, but he's now been forgiven. And we know that when the dwarves, when they recoil from his hammer, right, we know that. They've been given consciousness. So that's God forgiving. That's Iluvatar forgiving him for that. Yeah. Do you want to follow up?
I'm just thinking, should we, as we move into the Lord of the Rings, be thinking of the Ainur as corrupted beings? Because obviously there's Saruman.
Yeah,
who falls,
Sauron, right.
Or no, Saruman.
Oh, Saruman, I'm sorry.
Who doesn't fall initially but falls later on.
Right.
So even these beings who we would say are part of they're the 2/3 that stayed with we're kind of moving in between Christian and Tolkienian mythology right here. But
sure.
These Ainur who initially did not fall, but they fall later, what are the implications for that in Christian thought?
Yeah. Well, I would say they'd be the exact same implications as Lucifer falling. That's what so Melkor is Lucifer, right? I think that's supposed to be pretty clear for us that he is the fallen angel, and so it's not surprising that he takes others with him. And ultimately Sauron is a Maiar, and Saruman as well. They all fall. So I think the temptation is there, and Gandalf could fall. Yeah, I think that he knows that. Galadriel could fall. They know that. And so that's a huge temptation for them that they have to overcome. Aragorn could fall too. But remember, Aragorn is really the only one who's not that affected by the ring. Everybody else is much more than he is. And I think it's because he knows his place in a way that the others don't quite. They're still trying to, Gandalf's not quite the white yet. Galadriel hasn't quite proven herself. Aragorn's pretty confident, in a good way, about who he is. So, does that help? But I want to keep thinking about this, and I want you guys, as we're reading The Lord of the Rings, I want you to ask, why does the Silmarillion matter for it? Because remember, Tolkien, one of the reasons it took him so many years to get it published is because he insisted that the Silmarillion be the first book of The Lord of the Rings, right? And that no publisher would do that. But that's how intimately he thought they had to be, that it had to be, he wanted to call it the jewel in the ring, right? The saga of the jewel in the ring. Doesn't quite have the same ring as Lord of the Rings, but that's what he wanted to do. So I want you guys to keep thinking about that. So the role of the Valar, the role of Iluvatar, and the only really direct way we have it is through the eagles. Whenever the eagles show up, that's Manwë giving us hope. So, yeah. And Beren and Luthien too, right, with that. So, good. Colton, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. And keep asking, right? Don't let that topic go away. Keep asking. Joe.
Yeah, maybe an obvious question, but the Silmarillion, the three jewels, and kind of that was like the one thread that you could trace throughout the whole story. But could you speak to that? now?
Well, right. So remember, two of the Silmarils are lost, and one becomes a star. So when Sam looks up and sees the white star, we can kind of presume that that's what he's seeing. So there's something, or at least it's a representation of it. So there's some element of it where even above the heavens, because Arendelle takes it and puts it in the heavens.
Yeah.
So there's something about that. And remember, Sam tells us that we're in the exact same story still. Right? He'll tell us that I can't remember if that's at the end of Two Towers or in the beginning of the Return of the King, but he'll tell us that they recognize that it's the same tale overall.
Yeah. How do you read the two sides like fighting for those three gifts? Maybe like three theological gifts, three.
I don't know.
Trinity, triune.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I've never thought about that. That's do the Silmarils represent something greater? I'm not sure. That's good. Yeah, that's very good. But I don't know. Good. Let's see. Magdalene?
Yeah, I mean, just going back a little bit, I wonder if especially with the Einar, kind of what you're talking about, there's a distinction between sins of malice and mistakes of ignorance or insufficiency. And so you see that definite malice in Morgoth, Melkor, and who fall with him, as opposed to maybe Aule, who he's not God, he's not omnipotent, and he can make mistakes, but that doesn't represent a full turning away from Eru in the way that it does with Melkor. So that's going back a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. Yeah, that's really good. Good. Yeah, tell me your name.
Sophia.
Sophia, thank you.
This may seem like a minor point, but I was wondering, we've discussed at length how important the idea of storyteller as subcreator is to Tolkien. And I was wondering what you made of the fact that the two most prominent storytellers in the Silmarillion, Maglo, the son of Feanor, and Daron, who betrays Luthien to Thingol, they're such problematic characters. I was just wondering if you had.
Yeah, it's a great observation. I don't have. I'm not sure. They've used lore improperly, right? So lore is a good thing. I don't know. That's really good. Yeah. You have a suggestion or a thought on it?
No, that was kind of troubling me while I was reading.
Yeah, sure. No, I'd never thought of that before, so I don't have an answer for you, Sophia. But that's a really good question. Something worth exploring. Yeah, good. Okay, Andrew.
On that, I was just going to say, he is the only one of the Sons of Feanor who actually survives, though, which I've always thought was interesting. He's the one who wanders the coast singing, and he's never comes into contact with us. Sure, he never comes into contact with us, but he's the only one who survives. So I always found that was an interesting point.
Yeah, that's good. Cecilia, do you want to make a point? No? Anybody? Yeah, Justin?
So I had, first of all, about the Ainur, is the ability to fall into sin or to turn to evil, is that connected to them being incarnate or having gone into?
No, it's not. It being incarnate exacerbates it, but it's not the same thing, right? It definitely exacerbates.
Okay.
So
is it connected specifically to having come into Arda and not staying outside in the void with the Iluvatar then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Because remember, Melkor goes bad before they've descended.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not connected. I know, like in Christianity, we generally have there was a point where they could choose, but now they don't really.
Yeah. Right. Once they've made their choice, I would. With Tolkien, it seems to be that they can keep making that choice over and over again. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had something else I wanted to. Oh yeah.
Sure.
I found when I was reading the Ainulindale, just coming back to our point earlier about trying to find where the sun is in the discussion of the three themes. There's a bit, it was just like a page later on page 6, where it mentions that the children of Iluvatar only came in with the third theme, which, especially with the outlook of the incarnation, would suggest, again, that the third theme is very connected to the sun.
I agree. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at that handout that I gave you guys. I put third theme, right, instead of Christ on that, because I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's good. Okay, guys, great class. Thank you. So next week, we're going to start The Lord of the Rings. All right, and we're going to dive right in. Everybody okay with that? You guys if you have questions or anything, don't don't hesitate to email me. I'm traveling a lot this week. I've got to be at Notre Dame tomorrow, and I've got to be in Atlanta on Thursday and Friday. But I'll be back on Saturday. So just if you guys have emails or whatever, let me know. Good. Thank you, everyone.